Hey, I'm Alicia, your non-monogamous relationship coach. Welcome to the podcast where my friends and I chat about our relationships, enthusiastic non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, kink, and our lives. You'll get a candid peek into what makes it worth it to live life outside the box. And in case you're still wondering, nope, we're not monogamous. Intrigued by polyamory, but unsure how it translates to long-term relationships, especially as we age? Today, we're venturing into the world of thriving polyamory in your golden years. Joining me is the amazing Kathy Labriola. She's a therapist, a nurse, and an author who's been living the polyamorous lifestyle for 50 years. Kathy's the author of 4 books on consensual non-monogamy, Love in Abundance, a counselor's advice on open relationships, one of my absolute favorites, the Jealousy Workbook, the Polyamory Break-up Book, and Kathy's new book, Polyamorous Elders, tackles the unique joys and challenges of navigating polyamory as we mature. So we're going to dig into some communication, legal considerations, and even keeping your sex life sizzling. Really just like planning for the future or for right now, depending on where you're at. So whether you're a seasoned polyamorous or a curious newcomer, this episode is going to give you lots of value and insights for building strong, fulfilling connections as we age. So get ready to learn about the surprising benefits of polyamory for older adults, the essential communication tools you need to avoid misunderstandings, some strategies for navigating jealousy in your polyamorous relationships, planning for your future, like the legal and financial things that you need. All right, let's do this. I hope you enjoy this episode. There we go. Amazing. Like I said, I'm really excited to have you here. I'm really excited to meet you. So I talk about my my own journey on the podcast a lot, but the big thing is jealousy, and the Jealousy Workbook was like pivotal for me. It was so important.
Great. I'm so glad. Glad it was useful.
Yeah.
Mm.
So helpful. So so thank you for being here. You're amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm really delighted to hear that the book is useful. And as
Yeah.
I would say about that book, there's lots and lots of different exercises and techniques and things in it. And most people will find 3 or 4 out of the whole book that are really useful to them. And it's going to be a different 3 or 4 for each person. So I just put them all in there because all of them are useful to someone. But I tell people, just skim through and pick a few that sound like they're likely to be useful, and just, you can
Yeah.
forget the rest until maybe at some later point you might find them useful for a different
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. Totally. And actually, that's funny. I've done that. I've gone back through it multiple times where I'm like, oh, this is what's happening and is relevant to me right now.
Yeah, I think sometimes people will start at the beginning and read each chapter carefully, and then it might take them a while to get to something that actually is useful to them. And usually when you're having a jealousy meltdown or attack or something, you need help right away, and you don't need to be reading through 10 chapters that are like going to be better used by someone else.
Now I go back, I have it on my Kindle, and so I go back and look at what I highlighted. I just click on
Uh-huh.
my highlights and I'm like, oh, there we go. That's the thing. That's what I needed.
Or probably you go back and see what you highlighted and said, "Oh, I don't even need that anymore because I'm so advanced now. I'm beyond that." So that's kind of good
I
to
have
be able to
grown.
see your progress over time.
Totally. I also you have a new book, and congratulations on your new book.
Uh-huh.
Polyamorous Elders.
Yes, that is a relatively a new book. It came out beginning of last year, about older people practicing polyamory, and I think it's really useful for older people to see themselves reflected in the media, since so much of the time when you see anything about non-monogamy, it seems like it's glamorous young people in their 20s who are trying this for the first time, and it's a very different experience with aging, and so many of the people that I interviewed for the book have been in polyamorous relationships for 30, 40, 50 years or more, so have a lot of experience that can be hopefully useful to younger people so they won't have to make the same mistakes we did. You can make new and more creative mistakes of your own.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about it, and I was like, polyamorous elders, like what what qualifies as an elder?
55 and above.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I used that in the book because 55 is when, you know, the federal government and doctors and the healthcare system and everybody decides that you are officially old at 55. You are no longer middle-aged. Sorry to break it to those people listening to this who may not realize that they are officially considered old. And for most people, that's when they start experiencing things that are related to aging, whether they're thinking about retiring from careers, their parents are getting ill and disabled and possibly needing care and possibly dying. They are potentially experiencing some health problems of their own, and a lot of things are happening in their lives that are related to aging. But to confuse things further, you know, there are two generations of elders. One is that, you know, 55 to 75 group, age group. That is the so-called baby boomers that were born after World War II, from 1948 to 1964. But there is still an older generation I call the older elders, who they were born during the Great Depression in the 1930s and lived through the Great Depression and World War II and a lot of other things. They were born and raised in a much, much, much more conservative
Mhm.
era than the baby boomers. The baby boomers were kind of the drug, sex, you know, and rock and roll generation. So even though they're all elders, the baby boomers and then the older elders that were, you know, born during the Depression and lived through World War II and all that, they had very different lives. And the older elders were much more likely to have had very conservative lives and gotten married and had children when they were young and then maybe became polyamorous later on.
Gosh, that's as you're saying that, I was like, man, are there a lot of non-monogamous and polyamorous folks who are like over 75?
Yes.
I
There are definitely a lot more in the 55 to 75-year-old group, just because the folks that are over 75, a lot of them, if they were polyamorous, if they have been polyamorous, one of their partners has died by now. And so they may
uh-huh.
be monogamous by default because at age 79 or 80, if they had two partners or even three, one or two of those partners has probably died by now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
many are what I describe in the book as monogamous by default, just because they're not exactly thinking about going out and dating at, you know, 84. You know,
Yeah.
they've got other
Yeah.
concerns that are a little more pressing. And if they have one partner, they're pretty happy with that at this point in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. I just hit the you must go get a mammogram age.
Aha, okay. You must be
And
40.
45.
45. Oh, that's right. They raised it.
They raised it.
I'm a nurse by
Yeah.
trade, and I know previously it was 40. Now they've raised it to 45. That so you
Uh-huh.
don't need to be exposed to that extra radiation at an early age when you're not likely to have breast cancer, thank goodness. Mhm.
Yep. My gynecologist had this whole conversation about why we do it at this age versus that age and all the risks, and it was really lovely, really lovely. And I was
Good,
like,
good.
man, am I an elder yet? I got 10 more years though.
Right. No, no. You know, the mammogram means you're officially middle-aged. Sorry
Yep.
to break it
That
to you.
that and my optometrist was like, I'm afraid to tell you, you have this thing called dry eye that affects middle-aged women.
Ah, ah, ha, ha. Yeah. Ah, ha.
Uh, this is how it goes. All right.
Mm. Well, look at it this way. And when I turned 45, I decided, oh, maybe I'm at the midpoint now. Maybe if I live to be 90, I'm 45. I'm halfway there. I've got a whole half of my life ahead of me.
And all the wisdom and mistakes
Right.
made.
And because you're younger and with advances in medical science and you probably have better nutrition and all those things, you know, you probably live to be 100.
I hope so. I hope so. Amazing. So I wonder what when say someone's my age and looking ahead to being polyamorous, like I have 3 partners and I have 3 kids, and you know, what should I be looking ahead to? Like
Well,
like as a polyamorous person that will stay polyamorous, I anticipate.
mhm.
What kind of things are does the polyamory affect as you're aging?
Well, one very kind of dry, boring thing, but really important
Yeah.
is, especially because you have kids, is to make sure you have all of the appropriate documents in place, like your will
Mhm.
and your directive to physician that tells your doctor who you want to make decisions for you when and if you are in a coma or something, or
Yeah.
have, some reason why, get hit by a car, God forbid, and you can't make decisions for yourself. You want because for That's important for everyone, especially for poly people, because it's not usually someone we're married to or have a blood relationship with that we want to make those decisions for us. So that's pretty important to have that directive to physicians in place. That directive also tells your doctor whether you want to be intubated or resuscitated or what kind of medical procedures you do and don't want, which is pretty important since, there are a lot of medical procedures that they will force on you if you haven't specifically said you don't want them. And
Yeah.
as you get older, obviously you're not old yet, thank goodness for you, but uh, as you get older, that's very important, and it's pretty important to think about that now and talk it through as to what you do and don't want. As I say, being a former intensive care unit nurse for almost 20 years, believe me, I've seen some terrible things happen to people that they didn't want, which they could have avoided if they had something in writing. Uh, so, particularly if you have 2 or 3, in your case, 3 partners, you want to decide, is one person the most ideal person to make those decisions,
Mm.
particularly if they are a medical professional or if there's someone who will not be flustered in that situation and will not faint in the hospital at the sight of blood, things like that.
Who's my
It
most
has
practical partner?
Right. It's not the person necessarily who's like your most primary partner. It's the person who's going to be the best at helping out in those situations. Naturally, you want the other
Yeah.
people to weigh in as well. But in my case in particular, now my parents have passed away, but they were whacked out born again Christians. So you can imagine I did not want them making decisions for me in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form. So it's very important to me to get those documents in place.
Yeah.
And that's also very important because if you or one of your partners is in the hospital, you may not have the right to visit them. They may not have the right to
Mm.
visit you unless they're named specifically in that document. And I
Yeah.
have experienced that, which one of my partners almost died from a brain tumor and was on the operating table for 9 hours having brain surgery, came out of brain surgery and went into the ICU and was in a life and death situation. They would not let me into the ICU until I produced that document that said, I'm the person who has durable power of attorney. I'm the person. See, my name is on here. So
Yeah.
even in that situation, they were refusing to let me into the ICU because I'm not a blood relative, nor was I legally married to that person.
Mhm. Mhm. It's
So I
so
could
important to
tell
have.
you from personal experience, that's pretty important. And having a will is very important if you have. Obviously, you have children. You want to make sure your children are taken care of.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you name who is going to get custody of your children if something happens to you. And that's particularly difficult in a poly situation
Yeah.
because if you have 3 partners, you can't be legally married to all of them. And so they would have no rights of any kind to any custody unless you specifically name them as people you want to be co-guardians of your children. uh,
Yeah.
who do you want to be in charge of your finances if for some reason you could not make financial decisions? And again, it's
Mm.
not the person who's your primary partner necessarily, it's the person who understands finances and who is at least as likely to make good decisions financially as you are.
Yeah.
So you want to pick someone who really is the right person for that job. Anyway, that's this paperwork is very important, and I do have a chapter in the book about it and about the different documents that are useful. But beyond that, just having verbal or written agreements that are not legally binding in any way, but are between yourselves
Yeah.
about what you each expect of each other and
Mm.
what you want to happen in the event of, say, one relationship dissolving. It's important to have those agreements, particularly for like 3 or 4 people who, I don't know if in your case, but many, triads or quads are living together. And each person, so I've seen many triads where each of those 3 people had very different ideas about what was going to happen if one of them broke up, if one
Yeah.
relationship broke up, who's going to move out and who's going to
Yeah.
stay, who actually owns the house or is on the lease if you're renting. All of these things are pretty important, and people do generally behave better in a breakup situation if it should happen, uh, if they have made specific agreements in advance rather than just, well, I sort of remember we may have talked about it 10 years ago, but I don't remember what what we decided, or I
We
thought
said
it was
we'd be
the
together forever. This was never going to happen.
right. And in many
Yeah.
cases it does, the breakup
Got
never
to be
does happen,
practical.
hooray, but sometimes
Yeah.
it does. And uh I think I always tell people it's really important to make those kinds of agreements before you move in together, or if you're a couple and someone's moving in with you as a couple, or if 2 or 3 people are moving in together, all at once.
Hmm.
It's difficult because at that moment, you're in the flush of, we're madly in love, we're becoming a family, we're moving in together. Yeah, you're not thinking about, someday we might break up. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's hard to think about those things at that time, but it's much better to make those decisions before you move in to find out, do you have like compatible ideas about that?
Yeah.
And even decisions about living together, like who's responsible for what, and finances. Are you going to keep each person going to keep their money separate? Are you going to merge your finances completely together and throw it all in one pot? Or are you going to use a hybrid system, which a lot of poly families use? They have a house checking account for the house, and each person puts part of their salary in that, part of their income in that, but the rest you keep for yourself, and use it for whatever you want. So people have very different ideas and the values around money and around things like that. It's pretty important to get those things worked out before you move in
Yeah.
at any age, but especially as you age. I've seen a lot of poly families break up, who are older,
Hmm.
and break up because of issues directly related to aging, such as I've seen a lot of families where one person in the household, their elderly parent, needed care. And they, of course, made the assumption, my mother will move in with us and my poly family, we will all take care of her and we will support her financially. And the other people said, well, wait, we never signed up for this. We never agreed to that. Or conversely, I've seen many situations where someone's adult children, the adult
Uh-huh.
child loses a job and needs to move in with mom or dad, or
Yeah.
the adult child goes through a divorce and she wants to move in with mom with the grandkids. And of course, that mom says, well, yeah, of course I'm going to take in my daughter and the grandkids. And the other people in the house say, no, we never agreed to support your daughter financially or let the kids live here. And furthermore, we've all raised our kids and we do not want, a 2-year-old in the house anymore. So
Mm.
th- talk about those things before you move in together. Or if you haven't, before you move it in together, do it now before you face a situation where you have an elderly relative with dementia and
Yeah.
you haven't made an agreement about whether your poly partners are going to take that person into the home with them, or are they going to pay for the care if that person needs to be cared for in a dementia facility or something like that. People make assumptions that end up causing them to be very angry and bitter and sometimes end up breaking up the whole family.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Mhm.
makes so much sense, and it's definitely not something that I hear talked about very much because, um, yeah, we just everyone has different ideas of family and community and how you're supposed to take care of people.
Mhm. Well, and I mean, because you're too young to be facing those things yet, thank goodness. But but in the next 10 or 15 years, you easily could.
Yeah.
Or even people in your age group,
Mhm.
in the 30s and 40s, I've seen families break up because somebody had a sibling who lost a
Mhm.
job or was on
Mhm.
drugs or didn't have was homeless, and they said, "Well, of course we're going to take in my brother," and the other people said, "No, he's a drug addict with anger management issues. No, we don't want him living here." You
We didn't grow up with him.
And we didn't agree to this, so it can
Mm,
happen when you're younger, but it's much more likely as you get older that you're going to have adult children down on their luck or elderly relatives who are
yeah.
disabled and needing care.
Yeah. I'm actually yeah, my parents are older and my stepdad has Alzheimer's, and so we're navigating
Oh,
all of that
wow.
and going, "Okay, and what's
Mhm.
gonna happen? What's gonna happen in the next couple of years, in the next 5 years,
Mhm.
10 years? Who knows? Gotta figure that out."
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
my mother had dementia for 12 years.
yeah.
So that's a
Yep.
long time, and you're talking like long-term planning.
Yeah.
That's something that is really very tough, and so you have my sympathy and empathy because I've been through it,
Thank
believe
you.
me.
Thank you. Yeah. It's definitely, I love that you're saying that people should talk about that because I don't even know that people talk about that when they're monogamous.
They don't often. It
So
just
many assumptions are made.
uh-huh. But I
Yeah.
think I do think monogamous couples that are in a much more traditional relationship are more likely to be on the same page with saying, okay,
Mm,
we've been married for 40 years. Your mother has been my mother-in-law all that time. She's a member of my family, and
yeah.
I would, of course, take her in and take care of her. And traditional monogamous couples are much more likely to 100% merge their money together, and so they're much more likely to say, well, it's our money, not your money. And so, of course,
Mhm.
we're going to spend it to take care of your mother,
Yeah.
So, or your adult, or our adult children, it's much more likely it's going to be our adult children that are needing to be have taken in and taken care of. So
Yeah.
I think monogamous couples certainly can end up getting divorced over something like this too, but it's less likely just because they're much more likely to have shared assumptions than a poly family.
Yeah. Yeah. This is amazing.
And it's just
It
more likely that two people will be on the same page than three or four.
it's a lot easier to sway someone in your in your direction if there's not a lot of them.
You can lobby them.
Yeah. It's like watching, like, I'm picturing, like, was it Survivor? Where you had to, like, get
Ah!
people on your side we're gonna vote them off the island.
I hadn't even thought of that yet. A polycule as the survivor. I hadn't even thought of
Uh-huh.
that. Mhm.
Amazing. You
Mm.
mentioned that you've been a nurse and a counselor, and I'm curious how that, like, being in the healthcare profession
Mm.
um, how has that, like, impacted how you approach polyamory and how you, talk to people about it? Like, it sounds like you have, like, a very strong like, from a medical perspective of, like, here's a long term what can happen. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. It certainly has influenced me just because I've seen, so much go on with people who, are in the hospital and people, a lot of sort of laypersons who don't have a medical or nursing background just aren't even aware of what kind of medical treatments could await them that they may not want or that they may want and may want to lobby for and ask for and want to be informed about. So yeah, I really do encourage people to learn as much as you can about aging and illness and disability. As much as those are not sexy glamorous topics, they are going to impact you, either your parents or yourself eventually, and your
Yeah.
partners. And it's one of those things too that is a major strength of polyamory with aging, is that I have talked to so many people who have said, wow, when we got into this, polyamory, non-monogamy thing 40 or 50 years ago, we were in it for the excitement, the sex, the romance, the adventure, the, transgressive, just in your face, look at us doing something so crazy kind of aspect to it. We never, a lot of people said, wow, that was where we got into it. We weren't thinking at the time, gee, it's going to be great 40 years from now when one of my partners is disabled and sick that I have a metamor or two to help take care of them. For, we weren't really thinking about that, but wow, that's a real benefit to polyamory in old age. You have more people to help you take care of one member who gets sick. You also you also have more people with more incomes, which is very, very important as you age. When people start retiring or being forced out of jobs, since there is a lot of age discrimination and there's a lot of pressure to push older people out of jobs because they have higher salaries because they've been in the company for 30 years. They have more benefits and all that. So suddenly when people start retiring or getting pushed out of their jobs or fired, laid off, whatever, or become disabled and forced to have to leave a profession, uh, suddenly your income is much less. And so
Yeah.
if you've got several people in the polycule, even if you may only have one partner or even two partners, your partners have partners. There are more people to help out. Even if you're not living together as a group, there are a lot more people to share and help financially if needed. It's especially true if you live with, if like 3 or 4 people are living together in one household. And a lot of older poly people are living in duplexes where it may be two couples sharing a duplex, uh, or it may be a triad where it's usually there's a woman at the center, two men, and they each have a apartment in the duplex, and the woman goes back and forth, but you're essentially, you have one house that you're supporting,
Yeah.
and you have 3 incomes to support that house. So
Yeah.
that's that's a big advantage. And particularly if usually one person is maybe a few years younger and is going to work more years and still have a higher income, or one person who, even if they're not younger, still is working full time. But I'm 70 and I'm still working full time. I love my work. I don't see any reason to quit. If I were still working as a nurse, I would have had to retire because that's so
Yeah.
physically draining, demanding, strenuous. I just couldn't do it at this age. But doing counseling, you do it sitting down, it doesn't
Yeah.
require physical labor. So yeah, so I'm still working full time, even though, one of my partners is retired. So that's a big drop in income because one person is retired, but
Yeah.
the rest of us are working full time. So there's still a lot of income. Whereas I've seen a lot of monogamous people who suddenly find they are in deep shit when one or both of them retires and they don't have enough money to live on.
Yeah. 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 That is a really good point. I think there's something about being intentional with the idea of like you're building your community of people with a long view, like a future plan of,
Mm-hmm.
like right now we're in love and everything's hot, but what is this going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years? And what's our plan?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a
Mm-hmm.
plan? How are we going to take care of each other? That's so important.
Mhm, mhm. Well, and
Mm.
that may or may not be your goal. I mean,
Yeah.
for some people, the long term is not the goal. For some
Yeah.
people, the having exciting new love affairs is the goal, and that's fantastic too. I don't mean to imply
Yes,
that
and
everybody I don't mean to imply everybody wants to grow old together, one of the great uh advantages of polyamory is that you do get to have the best of both worlds. You do get to have the wonderful stability of maybe having a partner or spouse that you may be with for the rest of your life, but you get the excitement of falling in love or having just fabulous, love affairs that, you may not be that compatible with that person or, to even want to be together long term. So you don't have to be because you're not looking for like the one and only. You're looking
Mm,
for fun and adventure and things like that, as well as stability. So, sorry, with all this talk about growing old together and death and disability and all that, I didn't mean to imply that that's always the goal.
yeah, yeah, no, totally. Totally. I don't think it's something that's talked about enough
Hmm.
because the focus is generally on like what's exciting and free and what's happening right now and being present. And so it actually
Hmm.
the future doesn't get talked about enough and like what is this going to look like later? And I think it's important even if it's just this is only going to be short term, even if that's the conversation, great. But like I think it should be happening more. Definitely.
Well, and that's part of the reason I wrote the Polyamory Break-up Book, which is another one of my books, because it is inevitable that if you're polyamorous, you're going to have some breakups, and that's okay. I think the monogamous people are on this relationship escalator where, you date, you get serious, you live together, you get married, you're expecting, it to be permanent. Whereas with polyamory, we are, if we're going to have numerous partners, not all of those partners are likely to be, 100% compatible with us for a long-term relationship. Or even if they're very compatible with us right now or for the next 10 years, we may be in a very different stage of our life, or they may be in a different phase of their life where we no longer are compatible. So, a big part of the reason I wrote the Polyamory Breakup Book is that I want people in poly relationships not to see breakups as like a big failure, but to
Mhm.
see it as this is an inevitable part of being non-monogamous, and find a way to do it graciously and with some ethics
Yeah.
and kindness and love, so that you don't have to become enemies. And often even in the Poly Elders book, the people I interviewed, uh, particularly gay men and lesbians, their former partners and ex-lovers were almost always part of their polycule, even though they weren't in a sexual romantic relationship with them anymore. Very key people in their families and part of their family, very key people in terms of taking care of each other in old age, and helping each other financially, especially true of lesbians, just because women, not because they're lesbians, but because they're women, we don't make as much money as the men. I know that's not exactly a
Yeah.
news flash. We all know that.
Yeah.
But if you get two women in a relationship versus a woman and a man in a relationship, or two men in a relationship, those women are likely to be poor. Lesbian couples are much more likely than anyone else to be poor. So having your ex-lovers and more current lovers with more income, that's a big plus in those
Yeah.
situations. But keep,
Oh.
if you can, and if you want to, keep those ex-partners as part of your friendship group, as part of your family system.
Mhm.
Especially true for queer people in my age group, elders, because our families completely rejected us for being gay. We
Yeah.
were never, most gay people in my age group, we were never able to have relationships with our families are of origin because they completely rejected us for being gay. So we need our ex-lovers to be part of it. Has become more of the family
Yeah.
than is true for straight people, who usually have stronger relationships with, say, siblings and parents. And if they need financial help, or if they're sick and need to be taken care of, queer people in my age group could never count on that for their own families of origin for helping them in those situations.
Yeah. 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 It makes sense to yeah. Talking about breakups, the thing that comes to mind for me is like leave the campsite better than you found it. Right. Just
Yes,
think
yes.
of that. And like that's how you maintain your community. You maintain family and people who have been with you in your life.
That's a
Yeah.
good way of putting it. Yes.
Yeah.
Clean up that campsite a little, any trash that someone else left before you.
Yep. Yep. Make sure you put the fire out before you go to bed.
True, very true.
Oh, amazing, amazing. Before I hit record, we were talking about the non-monogamy week of visibility. Is that what it's called? Not the week of
Yes.
visibility. Yeah,
I think yes. Weak of visibility for non-monogamy.
that's what
Yes,
it is.
it started last year as the Day of Visibility, Day of Non-Monogamous Visibility, and now it is expanded to. It was so popular, it was expanded to a week. It's there are a lot of cities in the country that are having celebrations for it. It's the July 15th, 21st coming up very soon, and the pivotal organization is called Open, OPEN, it's the acronym, .org, and you can go to their website, and they have announcements on there of every city, that every place that there's any kind of event going on. And there are lots of them all over the country. Some places are just having like one event, others are having like a whole week's worth of events. And it's just a way that we can show people that we do exist
Yeah.
and that we are not like drooling psychopaths. And it's a lot of the events they're having are very like family friendly, with picnics and children's activities and things like that. So we're just trying to, present a more comprehensive picture of who polyamorous people are than we usually see or hear about in the media, which seems like always just focused on sex and the sexual aspect, which is important, but not really the main event.
Not the thing we're using for promotion.
I
Yeah,
think
there's
it's just
so many
uh-huh.
in-person events. There's also virtual events where people are doing Q&As and panels. There's picnics and wine nights and
Mhm.
game nights.
So happening, a lot of stuff happening. It's fun. So yeah, participate in person, virtually, or however you want to. Open is a good group to be in touch with. There's another group here in California that I'm very involved in, Polyactive. And that group is called Polyactive because we are political activists, as well as, of course, we love to party and have picnics and go to the beach and things like that. So we do have fun events, but our main work in the last few years has been focused on getting individual cities, including my town, Berkeley, California, and the city next to us, Oakland, California. Both Oakland and Berkeley now have passed ordinances that prohibit discrimination against people in polyamorous relationships. It prohibits discrimination in employment, in housing, in education, in public services, because previously to these ordinances being passed, it was perfectly legal to fire us for being polyamorous, or
Yeah.
kick us out of our housing, or refuse to rent to us, or refuse to, provide housing. So, and it is perfectly legal in almost all places to
Yeah.
discriminate
Yeah.
against us. And our ordinance is based on the gay rights ordinances that I personally was involved in during the 1970s in getting passed. Very similar, because at the time was perfectly legal to fire people for being gay, and for to refuse to rent to them, or kick
Yeah.
them out of their housing for being gay and things like that. So uh, it's a very similar thing. All we're asking for is to be, treated like other human beings, and not
Yeah.
discriminated against based on who we happen to be in a relationship with.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done to help with the shift in how people are being treated. It's so
Oh,
important.
telefun.
Yeah.
Telefun. And,
Yeah.
and hey, I could advise anyone, get involved in these various poly groups. A great place to meet girlfriends, boyfriends, any kind of partners if you're looking. So get
Yeah.
involved in these groups. Where else are you going to meet tons of fabulous, attractive poly people?
Yeah. 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 I love this. That's weekofvisibility.com is the website for the Week of Visibility for non-monogamy. And at the top it says, together we can normalize non-monogamy. And I love it so much, because that's entirely all I've been trying to do, is like, look at us normal people having normal lives and just like normal challenges, and like, experiencing things that everybody else experiences.
Mhm.
It's all fine.
Although I would hate to be normal. Wow, it's that's
That's
being
true. I
being
just
normal
want
sounds so
normal to
good.
change.
Right, right. What normal to let's expand what's considered normal.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, over the years I've had so many people say to me things like that some people might think are insulting, but that I think are hilarious. Things like, well, you have this real weirdo lifestyle, and you have this real, you know, bizarre sexual and romantic relationships, but you seem boring and mundane like everyone else. So I don't know if that should be I should be insulted by being told that, or somebody even said something like, well, you know you have this really strange lifestyle, and it's really weird. You're really kind of a weirdo, but yet you seem sort of wholesome.
Yeah.
That one upset me. I was like, wholesome? When was I ever wholesome? Wow.
What are
But
you
I mean, they
saying?
meant it as a compliment.
I love that so much, and that's funny. That makes me think like I've been really lucky in building this community around myself that is full of weirdos and people who like dress up as pirates and mermaids and go play naked in the woods. And like so for me, like that's just normal, right? Doesn't everybody do that?
Uh, well, I think it's a little bit like, um, you know, the I know a lot of lesbian couples who uh, we jokingly call the straight lesbians because they want to do what one of my ex-girlfriends called they want to out het the heterosexuals.
Mhm.
They drive minivans, they have kids, they're in the PTA, they're soccer
Uh-huh.
moms, they have the house with the white picket fence and the dog, you know,
Yep.
and they're just like straighter than the straights. And it's not that they're doing it to make a point, that's who they are.
Yeah.
And so I just think we have to make room for people to be, you know, all shades of sort of wholesome, straight, mundane, boring, and all sorts of transgressive and, the mermaids in the woods thing as you described, and, you know, the the tattoos and then, drugs and all those other things that, some of us enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sex
Yeah.
parties and all of that. Some people are going to get married some polyamorous people are going to get married in a church by a minister and like live in the white picket fence house. But we just have to make room for all of us under the big poly umbrella.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me ask you this. Is there could you give a piece of advice? What is something that anybody could do for free to have better or healthier relationships?
For poly folks you're talking about?
Mhm. Mhm.
Oh, okay. Um,
Yeah.
well, there are lots of fantastic free resources. Uh, Everything from uh, polyamorous or consensually non-monogamous support groups, discussion groups, book groups. There are these like book clubs, poly book clubs
Mm.
that read poly related books and then talk about all the great stuff in it and learn a lot from it. Most places have, most major cities have polyamorous support groups that you can attend in person or virtually. There are like quite a few right here in the Bay Area where I'm sure there are quite a few in the Seattle area as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
and all in any kind of major metropolitan area. Um, so there are a lot of free resources in terms of groups. There are a lot of online groups like Facebook groups and other groups like that like there's groups say that are for BIPOC people of color who are poly. There are groups for poly mono couples, like where one person is more monogamous, one person is more poly to help each other get support from other people. There are online classes that are free. Kitty Shambliss she has a site called Loving Without Boundaries. I'm sure you're familiar with her.
Yeah.
She does a free monthly class that is really good. That is all about like introducing you to polyamory and giving you some of the skill set. So all of those things are free. Whenever I do a workshop or class, I have a friend of mine videotape it and put it on my website so that people can watch it for free because
Mhm.
where I live and where I'm giving classes, there are a lot of these, we're sort of rich with these resources, but plenty of places you can't find classes like that. So I want them
Yeah.
to be on my website so that people can just watch them for free, since they have no access maybe in, Nebraska to that sort of class.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's wonderful. I also have a Facebook group. Nope, we're not monogamous. Same as the podcast name,
Oh, great.
where I do free classes as well. I think
Oh,
it's
good.
something that we should all be doing. Is just being able to give people resources and a place to look not only for information but for building community and like knowing that they're not alone and that there are other people
Mhm.
out here doing the same
Mhm.
things. That's so helpful. So helpful.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because so many people, even if you're in a place like the Bay Area where I am in San Francisco area, a lot of people have no poly friends, or
Mhm.
there's no one they know. It's not like they go to a workplace every day where there are no poly people. They
Yep.
go, to their children's school and there are no poly parents. They everywhere they go there are no poly people. So you can get feeling very isolated and alone. And so yeah, take advantage of these resources, because there are lots of people out there. A lot of people just are very closeted, or they're kind of, you're looking for kind of needle in a haystack. So the more resources you can have, the more you can feel like a part of a community, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If people want to find your work, where do they find you?
I have a website, just kathylabriola.com. And there are a lot of, as I say, videos and podcasts and stuff like that. I've been, various interviews on the radio and things that I've posted there, so people can watch them, listen to them if they want to, if they want more
Amazing.
information on something. And I do often get emails from people saying, "Oh my gosh, I was having a poly crisis at 2 a.m. and I found your website and I found these articles, and oh, that really helped me." Or, I have an article on, one of the many articles that I have on there is called "Are You in Poly Hell?" For some reason,
I
that's
have
the
read
one
that one.
for some reason, that's the one that, more than any other article, I get these emails when I get up in the morning that have come in at like 3 a.m. saying, "Oh my God, I was having this huge meltdown and I saw this article and it just made so much sense and that helped me."
Mm,
Uh,
so good. It's so good.
So there are tons of websites out there and resources out there, and definitely avail yourself of them.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I have one more question, and this one is not it doesn't go on the main podcast. It's for our supporters of the show at
Oh,
patreon.com slash not monogamous. And the segment is called Just the Tip. And it's what is a favorite or a best sex tip that you could share? Amazing, amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. You are a gem and a wealth of wisdom, and I
oh,
appreciate
thank
you so
you.
much.
Oh, you are
Yes.
too kind. Thank you.
And that was Kathy Labriola sharing her Just the Tip. If you missed it, you didn't get to hear that juicy sex tip, go become a lover or a friend with benefits to the show at patreon.com slash not monogamous. When you become one of the Patreon supporters, you get access to a bunch of behind the scenes content, bonus content, things that we hold aside just for the community. If you become a friends with benefit, you also get a Nope, We're Not Monogamous mug, which is pretty dope. Thanks for listening today. I adore you. Bye.